Have you ever caught yourself thinking that you're living your day like an actor, mechanically repeating memorized lines? Morning coffee, the usual route to work, the same conversations, the same thoughts before going to sleep. We call this life. But if we're honest, it feels more like playing back a recording. Somewhere between the first alarm and the last glance at your phone before bed, the most important thing gets lost: awareness. We're not living, we're functioning. And the most disturbing part isn't even that we're stuck in routine, but that we've stopped noticing it. Modern neuroscience offers a sobering truth. About 95% of our daily actions are automatic, performed without conscious control. This is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. It's the result of millions of years of evolution, which optimized our brain for energy efficiency. Every decision requires resources. Every conscious choice drains what we call willpower. And the brain, being a pragmatic organ, found an elegant solution: automate as much as possible, shifting processes into unconscious patterns. The problem is that along with routine actions, our thoughts, beliefs, and emotional reactions have been automated as well. Imagine this: every second, your brain processes around 11 million bits of information. Sounds impressive, right? But here's the catch. Consciously, you perceive only about 40 bits. Everything else is filtered out by a ruthless system psychologists call the reticular activating system. This internal gatekeeper decides what deserves your attention and what can be ignored. And its criteria are simple: alignment with your existing beliefs. If you believe the world is dangerous, your brain will highlight every threat, ignoring hundreds of opportunities. If you're convinced that success is only for the chosen few, your mind will find 1,000 confirmations of that idea and ignore any evidence to the contrary. This creates a paradox. We don't see reality. We see a projection of our beliefs. It's like living in a house with colored glass and sincerely believing that the world really looks that way. A person convinced of their own lack of luck is literally blind to opportunities. Not because they don't exist, but because their brain is tuned to a different frequency. Research shows that when we shift our focus, completely different neural networks become active, and the world seems to transform. Of course, the world itself hasn't changed. Only the filter has. But perhaps the most fascinating discovery of modern neuroscience is neuroplasticity. The brain is not static. It constantly reshapes itself in response to experience. Every new thought, every unfamiliar action forms new neural connections. This is not a motivational metaphor. It is a documented biological fact. When London taxi drivers memorize the complex map of the city, their hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for spatial memory, physically grows. When musicians train their fingers, the corresponding areas of the motor cortex expand, which means we truly can rewrite our brain. The only question is, do we realize this ability? And are we willing to use it? This is where the fundamental difference between two ways of living appears: living on autopilot and living consciously. Autopilot is when you react automatically, running familiar behavioral patterns in response to familiar triggers. Your boss raises their voice. You shrink and go silent because 20 years ago, you reacted the same way to a parent's anger. A difficult task appears. You postpone it because at some point you learn, I won't succeed. This is not laziness or weakness. It is a well-trained neural program running without your conscious involvement. Awareness, on the other hand, begins with a pause. With that micro moment between stimulus and response when you notice, wait, this is a thought, it's not a fact, it's just a signal my brain is generating automatically. In that moment, something revolutionary happens. You separate yourself from your thoughts. You are no longer, I am a failure. You are a person having a thought about failure. It may seem like a small difference, but in reality, it is enormous. Because a thought that you notice loses its power over you. You gain a choice to follow the usual scenario or to try something different. This is exactly why most people don't change, despite genuinely wanting to. They try to change results without changing the program. They want a different life while continuing to think the same thoughts and sing. It's like expecting a different destination without changing the route. Neural pathways in our brain are exactly that. Routes formed through repeated use. The more often you walk one path, the wider and easier it becomes, the more automatically your feet choose it. A new path is always harder at first. It's overgrown, unfamiliar, requires effort. But every time you choose it, you make it a little more accessible. And over time, the new route becomes just as automatic as the old one. Researchers in cognitive psychology emphasize the crucial role of reflection in changing established thinking patterns. The ability to observe your own thoughts essentially creates a meta level of consciousness. The position of an observer who is not entangled in automatic reactions. This is not esoteric thinking, but a practical psychological technique whose effectiveness is supported by numerous studies. The paradox is that we don't actually need more motivation, more time, or more resources. We need just one thing: to start using our brain consciously instead of letting it run on default settings. This doesn't mean controlling every thought. That's impossible and exhausting. It means developing the ability to notice key moments when autopilot is leading you in the wrong direction. To catch the thought, I can't do this, before it triggers the usual chain of avoidance. To see how fear disguises itself as realism or being practical. To recognize the moment when you're about to act the same way for the 100th time, even though it has never led to the result you want. And then something remarkable happens. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. When you start noticing your automatic reactions, they gradually lose their absolute power. You begin to see that there is a space between thought and action. Small, sometimes barely noticeable, but it exists. And every time you make a conscious choice in that space, even a tiny one, you are literally reshaping your brain. Neuron by neuron, connection by connection, day by day. The problem is not that you are stuck or lazy. The problem is that you are living by a program you never consciously wrote. Yet it runs your life with perfect efficiency. And this program will continue to operate exactly as it is until the moment you pause and ask yourself a simple question. Is this really what I want? Or is this just a habit of thinking that I want it?